Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB, aka Danielle Bezalel. Let's get into it. Are you going back to college or grad school this fall? Or maybe you're just on a student's budget? As a grad student myself, I know I am. What's the one thing that should be on everyone's back to school list? A vibrator, of course. If you want an incredible, high-quality new sex toy for under $50, Sweet Vibrations is the place to go. Sweet Vibrations is an adult boutique that promotes self-care, breaks the sex toy taboo, and encourages open, empowering conversations surrounding vulva sexual health and desires. And the best part? All 4 of their amazing toys have a lifetime warranty, just in case. Visit sweetvibes.toys to get your new shiny toy. Need a new sex toy? Spectrum Boutique is an awesome, sex-positive toy store that has a no-nonsense approach to sexuality and sexual education. They believe that fulfilling your sexual desires is an important self-affirmation and human right, and they welcome all identities, curiosities, and experience levels. Go to spectrumboutique.com and use discount code SEXEDWithDB10 to get their latest goodies. Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we're talking about a near $30 billion industry. Any guesses? Sex toys, duh. On this episode, we have 2 very special guests who are experts in this field, Sid Azmi and Janet Lieberman-Lu. Sid is the owner of and the head educator at the beloved Brooklyn-based educated pleasure shop, Please. Please is the epicenter of Sid's mission to change the way people think and talk about sex, and bring it to the mainstream as a daily indulgence for everyone and anyone at various stages of life. Janet is Chief Technology and Product Officer at Dame Products, and as a mechanical engineer, she knows how to get things made. We talk about Dame's lawsuit challenging the MTA's discriminatory policy for Subway ads with sexual content. Check them out at Dame Products on social media. Without further ado, here I am with Sid. Sid, welcome to the podcast. We are so excited to have you. How's it going today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Perfect. Well, let's just go ahead and dive right in. Why don't you tell us your name, a little bit about your background and like where you grew up and your job title?
Sure. My name is Sid Azmi. I am the owner and an educator at Please, which is an educated pleasure shop in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I originally grew up in Singapore. I am from Singapore, and I moved to the United States on my own at 19. I actually ran away from home. Went to college, did radiation therapy for over 10 years, started teaching, and then opened Please. And I guess we'll talk a little bit more about how that came out to be.
Yes, we will. That's so incredible. And I've actually went to Singapore for the first time last April, and I found it to be such an interesting place. It was really, really unlike anywhere I've ever been before, for sure.
Yes, it's a bit of a conundrum. You know, it's a modern society, but not socially modern. Mm-hmm. You know, I come from a Malay Muslim family, and let me just start this part of the conversation by saying that, you know, my experiences are unique to my own family values, and they're not representative of the Malay Muslim population. But as a Malay Muslim girl in Singapore, I was circumcised at birth. In Singapore. So when we think about Singapore being a modern country, you know, we don't think about young girls, baby girls, Malay girls, still circumcised even today. Mm-hmm. And that happens to me. That happened to me many years ago, and it still happens today. Singapore is a bit strange that way, but yeah. It's not always Crazy Rich Asians. Is that the movie that was
yes,
named after?
It is. Yes,
total lie. Yes.
For sure. So let's get into that. Like, tell us about your religious upbringing there, and kind of your journey to embracing your own sexuality and then eventually to founding Please.
That's a long conversation, huh? Let's keep it short. Anyways, so I grew up Muslim in Singapore, and like I said before, this is our values. We circumcise girls at birth because we think that the hood of the clitoris is dirty, and that women are being good women will one day bring forward good love, and good love will bring good sex. Never in our religious upbringing or in our education were we taught about what it was like to be a sexual being. It was just a conversation that was not spoken about at all. And it's actually, for me, it was kind of a slightly backward situation where I came to the States on my own, and I went to school, and I was in the medical field, and I worked a lot with the GYN service. Actually, that's how I became kind of familiar with the women's body and male's bodies. And my ex-partner was a doctor, so my parents started talking about their sex life with me as an adult then, never at all talking about my sex life when I was a child. So, in that sense, I guess, my medical background sort of was the opening for them to have this conversation. And I think that was probably one of the earliest wow moments for me, that wow, this even so-called backward parents of mine, have something to say, have something to ask about sexuality. So another thing is, I grew up. I went to an all-girls school in Singapore just by chance, and I think being in an all-girls school that had, there were girls from all over the world, and I think it was the very first time that it opened up my eyes that wow, there is more than just male and female. There are lesbians, there are butch femmes, and in Singapore, we don't talk about that. And homosexuality is actually, it's not illegal in Singapore. You're not punishable by law, but it's not at all recognized or respected. So there was sort of an underground okay, there is this other things about sexuality that happens that nobody talks about. Let's talk about it. So I guess among friends, we sort of develop this awareness, curiosity, and exploration. And then I came here to the States, worked in medicine, learned more about it from a medical standpoint, learned as an adult that I was circumcised and there was something different about me, not as a child. And sort of took measures to kind of, rediscover what my body could do for itself. So this is one of the big things that I like to share with people. Why I'm circumcised is not to call upon the victimization of the whole issue problem, but more of I am someone who doesn't have the entire clitoris. I can get an external orgasm because there are nerve endings, in your labia, and there's so many different. If you know your anatomy, if you are willing to do it, pleasure is yours. So for someone who doesn't have the complete bits, I have great, wonderful orgasms. You certainly can.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. And what an interesting relationship that you have to religion and to your family and to, your upbringing. Do you kind of look back at Singapore, the place, and your childhood? How do you look back on it? I'm sure it's so complex and there are a lot of gray areas.
For sure. I think, we have looking back gives us this perspective of, what was before, what we couldn't have, what we have now, what we didn't have, what we have now. It's this juxtaposition of scenarios. Yes. And therefore you have to take that with appreciation, that wow, there is this big diverse experience that we can have as human beings. I don't look at it as I was cut off from feeling pleasure. I look at it as okay, so I start from this relative point, and this is where I can grow from. And in sexuality, we're all going to have different starting points. There is no standard for what is good sex, what is there's so many different definitions of what sex is, what is good sex, and therefore it is up to you to decide to make it so for yourself, how you want it to be, what your sexual story looks like. So there's no use in comparing anybody else's story because its journey is unique and our bodies are unique. So if we as human beings can sort of sit down at the dinner table with our girlfriends and have this conversation and not be sort of comparing it with tit and tat, I think we would be amazed at the diversity of experiences that's available to us. Yes,
absolutely. I completely agree. And I'm wondering, coming from that background that you kind of just shared, and now being, the founder and the person who runs the sex toy shop, How have your family and like childhood friends reacted to your career? I'm sure there's a range of reactions, and like especially with stigma that comes along with it. Like, how do you address that?
If people want to have a conversation about it with me, I'm always happy to have a conversation. And the willingness to have a conversation is what removes stigma, is what informs people. Yes. So I can't speak for my childhood friends who've never tried to have a conversation with me or who refuse to have a conversation with me for whatever reasons. I don't know what their reasons are for not wanting to, know someone like me. I think there's a lot of, some cultures tie their femininity to being, to not overshare, whatever overshare means, to not talk about your sexuality, outrightly. So they have different ways of how they want to conduct their lives, and maybe mine doesn't go with them. I'm not going to assume that they don't like the way I live my life, because oftentimes people who shun themselves away have something to ask, have something to say. They are interested, they are curious. They just are not able to say it because their environment doesn't nurture that kind of conversation. So can't answer for that. But in talking about stigma, it's how do I address it? I think having worked in Please and talking about pleasure, it's all about how you relate to people. Everybody fucks, okay? Grandma fucks, mommy fucks, daddy, like every rabbi fucks, imam fucks, everybody does, okay? But how we do it, when we do it, it's all in the privacy of our own bedrooms. And so when we're trying to have this conversation about sexuality, it's really, really important to be able to relate to people, to understand where they come from. I cannot jam into someone's throat how I think sex should be. Just because it's a comfortable conversation with me and I can talk about it openly, doesn't mean like my 11-year-old at the dinner table is going to take it when I say the word clitoris. Right. So I have to have the same respect for, I have a respect for where he's coming from, and I have to carry that respect with everybody that I talk about with sexuality. And I tell you, when you come to people with that respect, they open up and amazing conversations happen.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've done classes, at mosque where I talk with young women who are about to get married, and I talk about anatomy and I talk about different things that they can do that are sexual, in the context of what Islam says is okay or is not okay. Or I just focus on bodies and I focus on pleasure and I focus on togetherness. And we design that conversation to relate to the circumstances that people are coming from. Great things happen. People learn. And we move forward. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh wow. Do you speak a lot? Do you do a lot of public speaking events?
A little bit in there. Yes.
You're very inspiring. That's number one. Okay. Number two, I want to hear a little bit more about Please and like what your all's mission is, like exactly how you got started on that. Because obviously there's a big leap from, well, not necessarily, but in my head, there's a leap from like radiology to like sex toy shop focusing on pleasure. So
radiation therapy. Yes.
Radiation therapy. I apologize.
Yeah. That's okay. A lot of people.
Tell me more about that.
So Please, the intention that I have for Please is to be a place where open conversations about sexuality take place. I worked in radiation oncology where we treat cancer patients, for a long, long time. And over again, I would see patients who've recovered from breast cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancer, prostate cancer. They all, at some point, people with good prognosis, of course, recover and they move on. But the conversation that keeps coming back is, the question that keeps coming back is, how do I become sexual again post-illness? Okay, for a 30, 40-year-old woman who's had to have a double mastectomy and remove their breasts, okay, great. I don't have cancer anymore, but I don't have my tits. How am I supposed to feel sexy? Right. When I take off my clothes and I see a big scar, how do I look at my partner and feel myself as sexual again? No doctor wants to have this conversation. Vaginal dryness with cervical cancer, with GYN cancer, or with prostate cancer. Men, one in two men will get prostate cancer, and they will recover from it.
That's the statistic?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
They will recover from it, but a lot of them will experience impotence throughout life, So great, I don't have cancer, but I can't get my dick hard again.
Right.
What do I do then? So then there are things in the in the sex industry that helps people through this. There are dildos that you can use, there are vibrators that you can use, there are dilators that you can use. So I wanted Please to be the bridge between these two worlds, the sex industry and the medical world, and sort of make the sexual wellness conversation a health conversation.
I love that.
So
how did you come up with the name?
I don't know. It just Please was a good, kind word, to please or to ask in a nice way is sort of like, I wanted it to be subtle. See, the thing, again, in order to have such a strong conversation be talked about so comfortably, we need to be subtle. I didn't want Please to be a sensationalized thing. So if you walk into Please, it kind of looks like the Pottery Barn of like pleasure shops. I didn't want to call myself a sex store. I call myself a pleasure shop because automatically when I say, oh, I own a pleasure shop, people will ask me, what is that? Already there is the opportunity to educate, to change the association of what a sex shop is. Yeah. Because if I were to say it's a sex shop, it's a lion's den. Oh, there is like lingerie. Oh, it's a fuck shop. Like it's not that. It is that, and it's not that. But the key point is to get to people to a point where they want to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's what I plan to do with Please. And so, I could have been an online store, I could have been a blog, but I wanted a physical representation of what's sexuality looks like. And if you come to Park Slope one time and you come to Please, it looks like any other store in the neighborhood. It's got glass from ceiling to floor. There are no neon signs, there is no pink, there is no pornography. It looks like a boutique. And then when you go in, you're like, oh, there are books that educate. There are, lubricants and barriers. So we have this conversation, and the conversation flows in Please, as it should with sexuality.
Yes. And so do you all have like workshops and educational kind of things that happen within the store, or what else do you do, I guess, that like kind of varies or like that makes you different, I suppose, from like traditional sex shops? Right.
So, I tell my staff, being at Please or working at Please is not about making a sale. We want to have a conversation with people. If at the end of the day they buy a $10 vibe instead of a $20 vibe, perfect, because we've started them on something that is affirming, validating, and give them the confidence to come back and expand the experience. This is what I aim to do. So it's an experience that you have where you can come in and ask all sorts of questions you want. We will answer them. The staff is trained about that. The store is not about carrying brands of what is new and what is not. We try and carry things that fit different bodies, does different things, accommodate disabilities, life changes. So it's a conversation that you have at Please. It's an experience. You can certainly walk in there and run in and get your vibrator and come out. But when you have the conversation, I promise you will leave with so many wheels turning. You will come back over and over again. And this is how we want people to experience their journey in sexuality. It's an ongoing growth.
And do you have a favorite toy like on the market right now? I want to get the skinny on your face. You don't have a favorite?
I don't have a favorite toy. Number one, who cares about what Sid likes, because your body is different from my body.
That's fair. That's true.
Yes. So I try my best not to favor one thing another, because really our experiences are going to be different. How we perceive pleasure, how we experience pleasure, who we play with, how we play with ourselves is very, very different. And I want to do you a service by talking about what do you like? What does Danielle like, or what does someone else like? Forget about Sid. Sid does her thing.
I love that. Wow, you really just flipped that question on its head, didn't you? That's so true. It's true.
Now, but if just to mention a little bit more about toys, I think we are becoming a little bit more thoughtful about sex toys, whether it is as a small business owner who sells sex toys, a middleman who educate people, or people who create sex toys. A female-owned company like Dame, for example, have created toys that are more thoughtful about the female's anatomy. So one of the things that I like a lot because of the intelligence of the design, the thoughtfulness is, for example, the Dame Eva. That's a clitoral stimulator that tucks into your labia, and it's genius because it's what a woman needs. It's the missing piece in penetrative sex, So things like that, and for people with disabilities, I have arthritis in my hands, and so toys like that gives me the freedom to not overwork my hands, and it makes masturbation so much easier. So I think in general, like the sex toy industry is also getting more smarter, and they're listening to women. I do wish, however, there were more sex toys for males than just male. Well, I call it penis sleeves. Some people might know it as like pocket pussies, which is. That's so 80s. Okay, we're 2019 now. It's male masturbators or like penis sleeves. I wish there were more for them, other than just stroking the shafts.
Right.
Poor guys.
Yeah, I mean, there are kind of like cock rings that vibrate and like different kinds of toys like that. But
the vibrators, it's funny. People come in all the time. Couples will come in and say, "Oh, do you have the vibrating cock ring with a little rabbit in the end?" I'm like, "What is your intent?"
Yeah, is that for him?
Right. I'm like, what is your intention for that? And I said, "Well, during penetrative, it will stroke my clitoris." I'm like, think about this, right? Every time that thing is on the man's penis and he's going in and out, which means that vibrator on your clit is going on, off, on, off. Have you ever gotten off? Like, all of you will go home being so titillated that you got this new toy that's going to like send you off the rockets, right? And then you're getting turned on, but you're not getting off, and you're wondering why the hell that is. And it's like, oh, something's wrong with the toy, something is wrong with the body. No, the design is stupid because every time, just the act of thrusting already deems it a failure.
Right, because it's not going to stay on there, and that's what you typically would need in order to orgasm.
Correct.
Totally.
So that's why that's one of the things that we do at Please. If you come in and you want this toy and you really want it, I just sort of candidly ask, why are you so attached to this toy? Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So my next question is about the balancing act that you do, which is you're a business owner and you're also a mom and a radiation therapist. Like, how do you do it? Like, what's your secret to like balancing everything successfully?
You're giving me too much credit. I think a lot of us, if we were to write down the things that we do in life, would probably do as much as not, if not more. I look at it as a privilege to be able to wear all of these different hats. I think the universe put it on me in order to give me this humbling experience of like, okay, you are never the master of anything. You're still sort of learning. So just be in this mode of learning and wanting to learn, being interested in the world. It is exhausting, and it takes a lot of asking for people's patience, like yours, to have to talk to me for like over 6 weeks because things comes in the way. But I look at it as it keeps me grounded. Because, there's so many different opposite polarized sort of roles that I play. How am I, a mother and then like a lover? People look at this as like, oh, they're two different spectrums. No, we're actually the same person. And we all are that. If only we just let ourselves say it's okay. I'm a mother who's a slut. It's all right.
They're very intersecting identities.
For sure. I mean, for sure. How else did he come about if mommy didn't fuck?
Right.
Come on.
Exactly.
Please, and happy children come from happy parents. So I'm going to keep fucking because it makes me like a much more chilled human being.
Right.
But then also being a radiation therapist, being a worker, being an employer versus being an employee versus being an employer. It also teaches you to be, in order to be a good captain, you need to be a good soldier. So there's all these different polars that kind of, I feel like keeps me grounded, and I enjoy it.
Yes. Yeah, that's incredible. Good on you for like really being able, of course, like nothing is perfect, but really being able to kind of like own all of those identities and like see where they do intersect and interact.
I think there is, there is this sort of an American culture. There's this how do I say it? No, you know what? Just scratch that out.
Okay.
That's a different speech I have for a different thing.
Totally cool. If it comes back to you, please share. So I want to know what is next for you and Please. Like, where do you see Please in 5 or 10 years? And then I also want to know about kind of Brooklyn, right? Because this is where you chose to, for one reason or another, make your sex toy shop. And this episode is kind of all about sex in the city, in New York City, how the city has or hasn't influenced, you and the sex toy shop and influenced you in one way or another.
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first.
Okay.
So I picked Park Slope, Brooklyn, because I lived in Park Slope, and I understood the demographic that was in Park Slope, and they're mostly families, hetero couples. It's a good mix of a whole genre of sexuality and identities, but mainly there are heterosexual couples with children. And I think these are the people who are crying out for help, because we fuck, so we got children, we want to fuck, but we are told that as parents, as we get older, this is not something that you think about, that this is something that's passed on. I am very keen on the conversation of long-term intimacy. And whether you're a hetero couple or gay couple, whatever your sexual identity is, I think wanting to be sexual is a part of our human experience. Mm-hmm. And if we can look at the sexual conversation and put pleasure a little bit aside and talk about tenderness and kindness and self-work, self-love, partner love, then I think we can be a much more wholesome human being in general. And sex just happened to be my channel of talking about these things. So I picked Brooklyn because of that. And I really think that the conversation of sexuality needs to be desensationalized in order for us to all embrace it as a human conversation to have. Mm-hmm. Sex is just not for the young, for the beautiful, for the sexy. Sex is for my grandmother. Sex is for mothers like me, who's sweaty and smell like pancakes. That smells great, doesn't it?
Not a bad smell to have, I would say.
No, I'm like, that is quite sexy, actually. I'm going to put my face in her. My pussy smells like pancakes. Oh,
God, if only. Oh, my God. How great would that be?
I'm sorry. You can edit that out.
No, I would love to keep it in.
No, so I guess, I wanted to be in Brooklyn and in Park Slope because of that. And I think the way I will carry it into the future is sort of keep this conversation of sexuality for all and to make it relatable for any human being in whatever dynamic or circumstance that you're in, and sort of make it relatable for you. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean for Please in 5-10 years? There is a business component of it that I really enjoy. I want to expand. I want to have different stores, different parts of the world. I think we can sort of change it a little bit to fit the places that we're going into. So there's the business component of it that I love, the expansion of Please as a business, but then also the social message. And this is why I talk to people like you with wonderful podcasts, with inspiring people who do sex work, to sort of kind of forward this conversation of sexuality. We cannot change the world just on our own. We have to collectively do this together. And, there's a symbiotic sort of energy that needs to be put on. Yeah. For sure. Yes, absolutely. And I can't wait to see what you do and how you expand and everything. And I guess the last question that we have is, what do you want everyone in the world, if you had a stage that reached everyone in the world, what do you want them to know about sex toys and sexuality? Okay, so everybody looks at sex toys. You come into, if you're talking about masturbation and buying a vibrator, it's like, oh, this thing that gets you off. You're going to go home and you're going to lie in bed and you're going to go naked and you're just going to jack yourself off, and you can look at it as that way. I mean, I get excited. It's like buying a toy at Toys R Us that you can use for yourself and tinker with it. You can look at it that way, or you can look at it as a tool that teaches you about your body, teaches you about what you perceive as pleasurable, and sort of teach yourself to be attentive to your needs. This is, as a woman feminist, yes, we have to fight for so many things, so many, equal pay, equal rights. Please do the dishes as much as I do them. But sex and pleasure is the one thing that we have access to in our own privacy at our own time. No matter where you are in the world or what culture you're in, you have access to your body all the time. So why not start there? Why not take that accessibility and make something good about it? And there's something about taking the time and learning about your body and figuring out what feels good, what doesn't feel good, being able to articulate in your mind what that feeling is like and being able to say it. You can create boundaries for yourself. You can create standards for yourself over time, but it has to start from you. And you have that place. And where toys comes in is just, it gives you this extra stimulus, extra stimuli of all the different things that your body can react to. So look at it as a learning tool to expand this incredible journey that you can have with yourself. Start there, and then great sex with anybody. You will never have bad sex with anybody.
If you start there. I love that so much. Thank you so much, Sid, for your insight and for sharing your story and for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
We loved chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our graphic illustrator is Alana from Imperium Illustrations. Alana specializes in custom, illustrative cover art for books, music albums, and podcasts. She captures your story's soul and amplifies your voice in meaningful design. You can check out her latest projects at imperiumillustrations.com.au. Longtime listeners will know that here at Sex Ed with DB, we love lube. But here's the thing, not all painful sex can be solved with lube. Often the pain comes from overly tight vaginal muscles, like trying to get a champagne cork back into the bottle. Has this ever happened to you? Luckily, there's a new product out there that can help when lube is not enough. Say hi to Millie. Millie is the gentlest, most recommended dilator for people with vaginas who experience pain during intercourse. Millie's gradual dilator technology allows you to be in control and take back control of your sex life. Learn more at milliemedical.com. Hey, Janet, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We're really excited to talk all about Dame and sex toys because the theme of this episode is sex in the city. Very clever, as we know. Definitely heard that one before. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself by saying your name, a little bit about your background, and your title.
Yeah, so my name is Janet Lieberman-Lu. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I went to school at MIT for it, got my bachelor's, and then worked as an engineer for 7 years, designing everything from dustpans to 3D printers.
Very exciting stuff. Riveting. Yes. That dustpan industry.
I was a quality engineer for like bath mats for a year.
Ooh, how was that? Was that crazy?
It was one of those things that was really stressful and like not important to anyone at all.
Hey, I really like having my bath mat and my feet are soaking wet. You need to just like get them all dry on there.
It was a lot about color.
Okay, well.
But it's still, I mean, everything matters. And yeah. Sometimes it was about the quality of the fabrics and the foam. But yeah, so I worked for about 7 years before deciding to start my own company making sex toys, which is Dame Products. And did you ask me about like the impetus behind it and things like that?
Sure, yeah. Just whatever you want to share. Just kind of like the story that led you to founding Dame.
So I was working at MakerBot, designing 3D printers. At the time, I was dating another engineer who designed products for a living. And I bought him a sex toy for his birthday that was like a couple's toy sort of thing, and neither of us could figure out how it worked. And that was like my aha moment of realizing that I had always accepted a lower standard of engineering and product development, value for my dollar, all of those sorts of things that a product engineer does for a living, out of my sex toys than I was from any other consumer electronics that I might be using or consumer products that I might be using. And, I thought to myself, like, I could do that better. And most of the time that thought flits through your head as a human, that's not true.
Right.
Like, the next immediate thought is like, nope, you can't do that better.
For sure.
There's so much that goes into that.
The doubt.
But instead, my next thought was, oh, wait, I actually can. This is what I do for a living. I, figure out the functional requirements. I design something for it. I've done finding vendors and suppliers. I've touched on quality. I've been a quality engineer.
Right. You know how to pick colors for
I know
things.
how to pick colors. I know how to make sure the colors come out right. I'd worked at a lot of small companies, which meant having to fill in the gaps around my role. So I picked up a little bit of marketing and a little bit of finance and a little bit of a bunch of different things. And there was also this element to it of realizing that companies had maybe been profiting off of a sense of shame that I didn't necessarily realize that I felt about the products. This is the first time that it occurred to me that I was accepting something less in this aspect of my life than I would from other products.
For sure.
And my only explanation for it was that I apparently didn't think that I deserved better. I didn't think that I was entitled to sex toys that worked better or were designed better for the use, or, any of these other elements that I feel like anyone who's a sex toy user probably kind of knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're not alone in that.
Yeah. And so that was and if you looked at pornography, which is the primary male sexual aid, it's always driven technology. But sex toys, the primary female sexual aid, kind of seem to be behind the rest of this whole tech revolution, the industrial design and technology and value for your dollar kind of changes that have happened in the last 10 to 20 years in consumer products. So wanting to be the change I wanted to see in the world, I decided to start a company making sex toys.
That is amazing. And so your title, are you CEO and co-founder?
I am CTO/CPO, Chief Technical and Product Officer.
Got it.
/ co-founder.
Awesome. And how did you meet your other co-founder?
It was something where it was sort of a doppelganger situation where there aren't that many young women starting sex toy companies in Brooklyn at the same time.
Right.
And people were starting to get us mistaken for each other or thinking that we were already working together. So about the third time that I heard from someone like, oh, my friend met you at this meetup last month.
Oh, people thought you actually looked alike too.
Yes.
That's funny.
Or just like by describing one of us, it seemed like it was describing the other one.
Okay.
We do both have, we're about 3 years apart in age. We both have brown hair that's long.
Got it.
We don't look that much alike, but we don't look that different.
Sure. And since you're doing the same thing.
Yes. I decided to meet this person, see, like maybe we could just have shared research into, market size and stuff like that. But what we both sort of realized in our first meeting was that we had this potential to build a stronger company together than we would be able to apart. Her background was in psychology, and she'd worked at a small consumer packaged goods company as, on this sort of sales, marketing, operations side. And my background was in product development.
Right.
So it wasn't that we were both starting to try to do things that were in each other's realms, and it wasn't that we were doing so poorly at it, but we could build something better together. And she already had the concept for Eva, which was our first product. And she'd already kind of done a fair amount of work of proving out that concept as viable. And I had already started on kind of like some market research stuff, and I had a lot of thoughts about what the brand needed to be from a perspective of like accessibility and the engineering side of it and that sort of stuff. Not necessarily the visual elements of the brand as they are now, but some of like the core values of what I thought it should be. So we were both bringing stuff to the table of what is now Dame Today.
Yeah, you complemented each other.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really awesome. So can you talk about your lawsuit against the MTA and what you hope to achieve? Because this is like a really huge thing. It's like all over the place. It's getting retweeted by everyone. Everyone's just like sharing it. Hundreds of thousands of views on these things. Like it's really viral. And I'm super curious, what was the impetus behind wanting to sue the MTA? Kind of what was the last straw and what's happening now?
To be clear, we didn't want to sue the MTA.
For sure. This is like a last resort kind of thing. In a position
where that is what we were doing.
Right.
So to kind of take a step back and set a little bit of a scene here. Building a hardware company is hard. Startups are hard. Hardware is hard is a phrase you hear a lot. And the longer you kind of work in the sex industry, what you realize is that advertising plays this huge role in holding us back from having better products, from valuing things more. Last year in some ways, we're trying to build a hardware startup just like anyone else trying to build a hardware startup, but with our hands tied behind our back. Because we can't advertise on Facebook, we can't advertise on Twitter, we can't, we can in these sort of roundabout ways, but not in anything straightforward. And no matter what we try to do, we always hit some amount of friction of some clause that everything just goes a little bit slower. So last year, Unbound, which is another New York-based sex toy company in this space.
We had Polly on our season 2.
Yeah. They tried to run ads with the MTA. MTA initially rejected and then said publicly in the New York Times that they'd be willing to work with a sex toy company. Even some advertisers, you never work directly with the MTA, you work with a go-between. One of those go-betweens reached out to us and said, we're excited to start working with this category. So we started working with the MTA, and or at least, sending things through the go-between. We sent artwork. They had some issues with some of the language, but it wasn't sexually motivated issues. It was like references to train delays that they didn't want to have in advertisements.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And so we rewrote it. Then we had a round of approved artwork. We did one more round of edits just because, more like we changed from wanting the long, thin ones to wanting the tall, wide ones,
sure.
And then we submitted that. It should have been our final artwork. We were ready to give them money. And then they came back to us right around Thanksgiving of 2018 saying, with a letter that said that they couldn't work with us. They'd never worked with sexually oriented businesses. And they actually updated their FAQ to specifically reference sex toys.
After all of your shit was approved already?
After it was approved in September, in mid-November, they updated their FAQ to call out sex toys.
So they backtracked. They're like, no, sorry.
Oh, yeah, backtrack. And they use the phrase, they've never run ads from a sexually oriented company. If you are a New Yorker, this smells a lot like bullshit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, all these cactuses are everywhere.
The phallic cactuses for Hims, which is a telemedicine company that does erectile dysfunction medication. They do other things too, but that's what those ads are about.
That's the majority of their ads.
That's really the one that's the most glaring. But, when we were having this discussion, if you were riding on the subway, there was Museum of Sex ads, there were Hims, Romans, ads for moving companies. that reference moving your kids' toys and your adult toys.
I've noticed those ones. I was like, oh, wow, this is spicy. But you're totally right. They're everywhere.
Ads for sheets that have references to masturbation, threesomes. There's the ads for PrEP and things like that. And, so we are used to dealing with a certain amount of double standards and a certain amount of, things that just don't really make sense for why, and we accept it a lot of the time. We tried to sort of get the MTA's attention with a PR campaign around it in January, and that was ineffective at getting them to change the policy because, it's not like it's overtly discriminatory.
Yeah, it's subtle.
Subtly discriminatory. What it's saying is that, like, an erection, being able to get an erection, that's health. So male sexual function is health. But female sexual pleasure, that's obscene.
Totally.
And that's basically the breeding ground. It's the mentality and the breeding ground that leads to men believing that sex is something that they take from women because they weren't going to enjoy it anyway, and they are entitled to it. And on the flip side, women feeling like the fact that they don't enjoy sex doesn't really matter, that they weren't going to be able to enjoy their sexual lives, and that they should actually sort of be giving it to someone else, even if they're not getting much out of it. And we know that these are harmful societal pressures and views, and we just kind of accept it. And that's the only framework in which it makes sense that we are some sort of bad sexually oriented company, whereas all these other topics are good, healthy, sexually oriented companies. That's the only viewpoint, I think, in which it sort of makes sense. So the more that we sat with the societal things around it, the more that we sat with the fact that nothing was going to change here, the more sense that it made to sue, especially because they're not a private corporation that can kind of make whatever decisions they want to on their advertising. They are publicly funded and therefore have to follow certain rules relating to the First Amendment. So it's a First Amendment case against them for discrimination. And what we've heard from a bunch of lawyers is the more lawyers we talked to, the more we heard that we really did probably have a case. And I've been excited to see that, like, I haven't seen any legal assessment of it from third parties since then that didn't also say that we probably have a case here and then that we've got a pretty good standing. They sort of worked themselves into a corner because, again, if you are a New Yorker, there's clearly sexual content. There's both companies that aren't sexually oriented using sex to sell products, and companies that are sexually oriented that might not be using sex to sell products, but they're penis focused. They're penis focused, and what we submitted as ads were incredibly tame. Right, and they, your toys, as we'll kind of get into, like, aren't phallic. Like, they have a lot of other shapes and sizes. There's nothing to say that we would never make a phallic toy. Right. Phallic toys have a purpose. Sure. But the penis is designed for many things, and female sexual pleasure is not in its top 3 functions. So it's really, if you're designing something that's optimized for female sexual pleasure, you're not going to end up with a penis. Right. So a lot of our products... Direct quote right there. That's great. It's a good one. A lot of our products are clitorally focused. We've got couples toys because a lot of people use sex toys in a couple setting, but very few sex toys are designed for it because there's a basic mismatch between how and why people use sex toys and who they're marketed to, what they're marketed for. Right. So we spent a lot of time looking into that and figuring out what the right tools for the purposes. And what it ends up with is our toys aren't going to raise a lot of questions for kids. That's true. So it would be a good thing to have on an advertisement because kids wouldn't necessarily understand it. Yeah. And kids aren't, number one, your kids are going to ask you questions that you don't want to answer.
And you're going to just have to do
You're
it
just going
when
to have
the
to do
time
it
is right.
eventually.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, like, they don't know what most of the ads on the subway are about, and the chances that they pick that one to try to ask more about
for sure,
somewhat low.
Yeah, totally.
Because it really has nothing to do with them. That really we're clearly not advertising to children at all.
Yeah.
You know, and the information that we had on our ads were, you know, scientific studies, quotes from people, from customers, happy customers. We really kept it
PG.
Clean, clear.
Yeah.
It did use the word vulva, but we would have been happy to take it out because one of our customers said, like, thank you from the bottom of my vulva. So we used that.
I love it. That's so good.
Also, you should probably be able to tell your kid what vulva means.
Totally.
If they're able to read vulva.
Right. Absolutely. So where are you now? So what's like the process of what happens?
It's a little bit anticlimactic at the moment because you file the complaint, which is the lawsuit, and then they have 60 days to respond, and we're currently within those 60 days.
Oh, wow. This is like a really perfect time to be kind of talking about, you know, what could happen or what, you know, the goals of what you want to happen.
You know, it's hard to say what the goals are per se. Obviously, we would love it if they reevaluated their policy and really thought about whether or not some of the thing about, there's something they say about pornography, which is, I know it when I see it. And that's actually sometimes used as the legal definition of pornography, is that you know it when you see it. But the problem with that is that that's highly dependent on the observer. Mm-hmm. So like we've had illustrations of how our products work, be classified as pornographic because they involved a vulva.
Right.
But it's not a very great thing for women if we are classifying all images of vulvas, even if they're animated and just a how-to, as pornography. That hugely stunts our ability to take care of our sexual health.
Totally. Yeah.
If we're being told that we have to hide all images of it because otherwise it's pornography. Just because, I mean, someone can masturbate to literally anything.
Right.
You know, your phone case right there. Someone's going to masturbate.
Super hot orange coming at you. Totally. Wow. Yeah. There's a lot.
So there's a lot to unpack there. But so if we would love it if regulations were, I think, a little bit more thought out about how biases are being brought to the table with them. Mm-hmm. We would love it, you know, if it is about the children, then make it about the children. You know, take out the rest of the stuff. It's not that I think that we actually should be taking out any sort of reference to sexual language or any companies that have anything to do with sex for advertising. I think that's bad for us as a society. Mm-hmm. But if that's where we're going to draw the lines, we should really draw the lines there. And if we're not, then it's very prescriptive to go in and say, well, these products that are important to me, that I think that I should have an entitlement to an erection, that is my definition of sexual health. Mm-hmm. But these products that over half of women use as honestly more like part of their hygiene routine, I would say vibrators tend to be more like that than they are like really hardcore sexy times.
Yeah.
You know,
which it can be for some people.
It can be, but they are also just, for a lot of people, it's just part of a daily or weekly routine. Right. That those products, they aren't something that you're entitled to and need to know about new things in. Right. And it really does, the advertising restrictions on the vibrator and sex toy industry really do stunt development and innovation in the industry because you can't tell people that you've done new things. It's only worth investing in doing new things if people can know about it afterwards. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, I really hope that you get what you're looking for and that not only your ads can run, but other companies that are doing really similar things, obviously. Because I think you're totally right. I think like without the information and the knowledge and the opportunity for equality, it's completely unfair.
And it's a perpetuating cycle because the lack of money in the space means that there's a lack of research backing up that vibrators are used for tons of health purposes.
Right.
You know, it's, so, you know, you get told, like, well, where's your data on the fact that...
It's like, well, give me some fucking money and I'll give you some data.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. That's actually a perfect segue into, like, are there other kinds of, like, difficulties that you've faced as female founders of this company in this space?
I think that, you know, being female, it's kind of split up, because being female founders has its own issues. You know, there's all the stats on, you know, if you do the same pitch but give it a male versus female voiceover, the male voiceover is more likely to get the money. Mm-hmm. If you, women are more likely to be asked about the risks associated with their venture instead of the opportunities. And I've definitely experienced that when I'm talking to investors. They don't want to talk to me about the upsides. They want to talk about, you know, like all the downsides. That's
really interesting.
So the female side is its own problem. In this industry right now, it's having such a feminist moment that I think it would actually be somewhat hard to operate in this industry as non-female founders. But that said, a lot of the investment money in the industry is still going to, like, Romans, hymns, male-founded companies that started in a male direction and are now branching out to female products. So you're still seeing the investment money go to that, even though the story is a lot stronger and the marketing is a lot stronger around female founders and most of the people doing it interesting space. Not to say that those companies aren't doing interesting things.
Right.
But most of the people doing interesting things in the space are women.
For sure.
Or women-founded companies. All that said, being a sex company has its own problems in and of itself. So these are kind of like separated, like the women-founded plus sex is more of an opportunity than a problem because it's a male-dominated industry that should be a female-dominated industry. So
gotcha. And you bring different things to the table.
Consumers are excited about it. You know, you're more in touch with your consumer because you are your consumer. But then being a sex company is hard to grow because every time that you're trying to do something, there's just that little bit of extra text that makes it that much more complicated, that much harder to get a loan, that much harder to get investment.
Right.
The fact that and it's not even necessarily the obvious things, the fact that there's very little data makes it hard for people to know how big the company can grow, or makes it hard to be able to justify claims about products.
Gotcha.
Yeah. When you're working with other companies, you don't just need to get whoever you're talking to on board, or even that company on board. You also need the companies in their ecosystem to be on board.
Totally.
For like payment processors or...
Right. I've heard a lot about that in terms of, I know Cindy Gallup talks a lot about not being able to get a proper payment processor because no one wanted to give it to her Make Love Not Porn. Yeah.
And we are able to work, because we're a slightly different category, we're able to work with companies like Stripe. But Kickstarter being worried about allowing sex toys on their platform was in part because they were worried that we couldn't work with Stripe.
So it's all connected.
So it's all connected. Like, they had to make sure that everyone in there, our product Finn was the first sex toy on Kickstarter. And we were only able to do that because we were able to assure them that everyone in their ecosystem could also play nice with us.
Yeah.
So Cindy does talk a lot about it's the fear of what other people think.
Exactly.
I tend to describe it as it's less that there's a taboo and more that there's a perception of a taboo.
Totally.
Every individual no longer thinks that it's taboo, but they think they're the only one.
Totally. That makes sense. Why New York City? How has being in the city been helpful for your business, and how does it kind of like influence your products, if at all?
I mean, for me personally, the why New York City is because I have a sleep disorder and I don't want to drive.
Oh, okay.
It's not super safe for me. So that's how I ended up in New York City. But I think it's so interesting that New York City has ended up being the center of that was a decision that I made 5 years before I decided to found Dame Products. I think it's interesting that New York City has become the center for sex tech. And what I think is interesting about it is that New York City has one of the highest percentage, and Brooklyn in particular is even a little bit higher, of female founders in the country.
Oh, wow.
So we're also a bit of a female entrepreneurial hub. And I personally know that if I moved to San Francisco, I would have a lot more companies that I could work for, but I don't necessarily want to operate in a Silicon Valley type environment. I had a lot of not great experiences working as a female engineer for other people, and from what I've heard out of Silicon Valley, it's not better.
Yeah.
If anything, it's potentially worse because it's
more cutthroat.
Actually more discriminatory.
Oh.
Is more what I'm concerned about.
Got it.
That because the tech scene is bigger there, it's harder for people to recognize how toxic the environment can be for women, and it can be harder to find a good job. Sort of the programmer culture.
Programmer? I haven't heard that term before.
I have.
Yikes. Okay.
And so I think that the fact that the current sex tech industry wave is a very feminist wave is probably related to it being in New York City, because New York City is another tech hub, but it's a much more female-friendly tech hub. Mm-hmm. And it has a little bit more space for, because it's a center for fashion. That's part of what keeps it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And also New York City, I think, is one of the highest percentage of women to men, the female to male ratio is skewed women in New York City as well. So I think it's a really opportune place for this feminist sexual health revolution to be starting out of.
For sure. That's really awesome. Do you have a favorite toy of yours?
It's pretty hard for me to answer that because they're all my babies. Okay,
fair.
I wouldn't have brought any of them into the world if I didn't think that they brought something new and different. That said, I think probably my favorite at the moment is Palm.
Okay, tell me about it.
So just to give my other babies a call out for a moment. Eva was our first product, and it's probably our most innovative couples use one. Finn has staying power. It's my husband's favorite of our toys. It's the one that is his instead of mine.
Okay.
And Kip was in some ways a happy little accident that we ended up with, where we found some features when we were developing an external clitoral toy that people didn't tend to realize that they wanted in toys, but that were really liked when we tested them. We were able to put them together in this ergonomic to hold little bullet. And then Pillow is just its own little category. But I birthed that one a little bit less.
Okay.
Because it's soft goods, and not that I wasn't involved in it, but I didn't sort of own its development in the same way. But Palm was the one where when I tested an early version of it, I just thought to myself, man, that is just what I want a vibrator to be.
Got it. So personally, you just really love it.
Yeah, it's Palm has no internal plastic structure. And for me, I work with the set and forget version of using a vibrator. I can just hold Palm in place.
Right.
It's just there. It's on.
Sure.
We had a certain amount of inspiration from a magic wand for it, in that the head of a magic wand is soft, and you can hit a big area at once. And there was a bit of this theory that the reason why the magic wand is so popular isn't necessarily because it's so strong, That's what some people are using it for. But a bunch of people buy the little kits to make it a little bit weaker. So why are they buying that one? And it's because it's the only product that lets you hit a big area at the same time.
Totally.
So POM, because it has no internal plastic structure, when you press on it, it stays conforming to the entire area of the anatomy that you're trying to press on.
Got it.
So if I were more of like an exploratory, like, let's try out my nipples, sort of person.
Right.
Then probably Kip or Finn would be my favorite. But I think I'm a like, let's just get the whole area at once kind of person.
Oh yeah, yeah. The magic wand is my personal favorite, and I think it's exactly the reason that you just said is because it's hitting all of the clitoral structure kind of all at one time.
Yeah.
In this large surface area.
And you can apply as much or as little pressure as you want to.
Exactly.
When we were testing clitoral toys, what I noticed was that they'd be designed to match my anatomy, and then I would press on them and they would tilt up.
Ah, okay.
And they didn't have to tilt up too much for whatever benefit the company had been going for, the designer had been going for in their initial shape to be gone.
Gotcha.
So POM bends pretty far, but you're not really using it because it bends pretty far. It's because it bends a little bit very easily.
Got it. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally. It makes me want to buy it, actually. That's amazing. So we have one more question for you, which is just to kind of close the interview. What can our listeners be doing to help fight for equality in calling out the MTA in terms of on their social media? What kinds of conversations? What's like your kind of like recommend?
I mean, I think obviously sharing and retweeting anything that you see about it helps us out. I think it helps a lot when people give their own viewpoint on it because it helps to, like we were talking about before, normalize that viewpoint on it, that it's not, you're not the only one who feels like this is a little bit unfair.
Right.
Because we all just accept things that are a little bit unfair all the time.
Yeah.
You can always, a really helpful thing is to, vote with your wallet.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to buy a vibrator, that helps us.
And that also helps you.
Funds the lawsuit.
It also helps listeners.
Yeah, it also helps listeners. Like we've got a 60-day return policy. So if you don't like it, you can just return it.
Right.
But the only reason we can have that return policy is because we don't have that many returns.
Right. If you know what they mean.
Wink, wink. But I mean, it's just like anytime you talk to a charity, the answer is like, just give us money. Like, because we'll be most efficient and easy. But keeping the conversation going, voting with your wallet, and also just contact the MTA directly. If you contact them, that helps to let them know that people are watching and it's not just, some entitled millennial company just trying to get a rise out of people because, oh my God, snowflake.
Right.
We really are doing this because we see the underlying message that we're accepting if we accept this regulation as they've decided to enforce it.
Sense by Wisp. Sensual jewelry for encouraging sensual well-being and sexual exploration. Personalize your sensuality by interchanging fragrance orbs with massage stones in the silver earring, necklace, or ring. Touch, smell, be. Find them at wisp.me.uk and at wisp.me on Instagram. Looking for a period game changer? Meet Lena, the reusable silicone cup that collects your monthly period blood. No odor, no leaks, and so comfortable you'll forget you're on your period. 90% of first-time Lena Cup users never go back to pads and tampons. Go to lenacup.com and use promo code SEXWITHDB to get $5 off your first order. Lena, a better period. Are you a cancer survivor or do you know someone who is? Early or severe menopause and painful vaginal sex can often be an undiscussed and unexpected side effect to cancer treatment. Luckily, Millie can help. Millie is the gentlest dilator on the market with user-controlled in-vagina expansion, enabling gradual increases in size with only one insertion. Getting better is hard. Don't shortchange your progress. More than 50% of sexually inactive Millie users return to sex within 3 months of using Millie, with 30% reduction in pain and anxiety. Use Millie to have more pleasurable sex and break your cycle of pain. Go to www.milliemedical.com to check it out. Our creator, producer, and host is me, Danielle Bezalel, aka DB. Our assistant producer is Kathy Cohen. Our graphic illustrator is Alana Rance. Our sound engineer is Oliver Devone. Our fundraising co-coordinator is Jamie Cooper. And our other fundraising co-coordinator / content assistant is Callie Cochran. Our music is by Ben Sound and Hook Sounds. Thank you so much to our featured voices, sponsors, and our listeners. Tune in next time.